Well, I was getting around to asking you. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I was noticing in one sit in particular that the nature of my thoughts were wholesome, but every time that I had one, it was disrupting my focus on the breath. And so I wasn't sure if if I should just drop those thoughts or if it's
Well,
okay that they're still there even though it feels like a disruption.
actually, let's look at that word disruption for a moment in the sense of uh, a real disruption would be if you just lost control of thinking about the breath and the breath went back to sort of a normal state because you're not paying attention to it right now. You're paying attention to whatever wholesome thought you're thinking. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's that would be a real distraction.
Right.
But if you're talking about the fact that the mind has quite a lot of time sharing capability, so that the basic point is not to be continuously all along aware of the breath at every point and paying only attention to that,
Hmm.
because that, in fact, is a kind of a concentration meditation.
Right.
But rather think of the in breath someplace on the in breath and the out breath someplace on the out breath is a harbor to come into out of the storm of one's own thoughts. But that's an analogy that you can think of is that you're out at sea, you're out in the world, you're out there in mental la la land,
Hmm.
but then you recognize for an instant that you're in a storm. Let's come home. Let's come to port.
Hmm.
And that would happen about once every in breath and out breath. That's actually not just what is said is required. The implication, strong implication, is that because it's a short list, that's actually the only thing that's required. And that is to be knowledgeable that this is an in breath and this is an out breath, and that it's a deep breath rather than, let us call it, an ordinary breath.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so the breathing becomes extraordinarily important, especially when you realize that you can oxygenate the brain.
Hmm.
I mean, you can give yourself a real buzz really easy. The last time I actually had a really major buzz was when I was at the doctor's office and she says to deep breathe while she's doing the stethoscope maraudering all over the body.
Yeah.
And I'm really pumping it up there, and boy, was it a buzz. And so, but I was intentionally doing it. She said deep breathe, and I know how to do that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
here I am pumping oxygen in and just getting quite full of it. So that's one of the points that I did not have to detail, making sure at every moment I was bringing that breath all the way up. No, it was like this is, looking at it towards at the end of the in breath
Hmm.
and at the end of the out breath are the points in time when one needs to take notice.
Hmm.
Other than that, having wholesome thoughts is precisely the point that we're looking at.
All right.
Because the other possibility is not watching your breath and not having wholesome thoughts, having junk thoughts instead of the wholesome gets mixed in and poisoned by and polluted with all of
Hmm.
the junk thoughts that we used to be predominantly there.
Hmm.
So this is more the way of practice
Hmm.
is to just be at one point or another, and that's the end of each one, is a good place
All
to
right.
put your focus. All right, because the end of the in breath has the quality of, well, how big was it? How big is it? Is this quite the end of it or not? How much more air are we going to push in here? And then, and because that's a question that gets answered or asked and answered with every breath when you're watching what you're doing. Okay. And on the out breath, then the question is, have you gotten it all out yet? Are you going to actually exhaust the lungs? And the best way to think of that is a sigh. Just, and the whole body kind of collapses, but not collapsing in the sense of falling over, but collapsing in the sense of coming straight
Right,
down.
right, right. Yep.
Okay, so this is a more of an indication, and you'd be surprised that as you get skilled with this, you become more confident that you can do it, as well as finding out how much freedom there is in the mind to do all kinds of things and still do this little exercise. And that only has to do with, so there's a whole lot of moments after I note the out breath that's finished out, and now it's starting time to breathe in. Now the mind can go wander away. We can go to Jupiter and back. We can go to Aunt Susie and back, and she's been dead for years. So that's what the mind is capable of. It's fast, and that what we want to do is to put this tether of the breath on that, to ride herd on them, so that you can actually do this. And then the next step will be, okay, now not only are we going to herd cats, we're going to choose which cats we're going to use. And that is the ones that can be herded can stay, and the ones that cannot be herded are out. And so that's the kind of way of looking at coming to wholesome thoughts. But if you say, okay, I've got wholesome thoughts and I got to watch the breath all the time,
Right.
then that doesn't have you the benefit of marvelating over really wholesome things.
Okay. All right. I gotcha.
And that's a really good question. I think that this is something that's an issue for a lot of students that get into deep practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Okay.
they use words like calling them background thoughts.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the point then is it okay now that you recognize that you can think and breathe at the same time? Congratulations. Now the next thing you can do is like walking and chewing gum, I guess,
Yeah.
to watch the breath and the thoughts.
Mhm.
That's when we begin to start herding them together to make sure that we're using the mind for wholesome thoughts, aspirational. In a way, you could even go so far in a childlike language, say, pretend to be whatever you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But we're doing it right here in the here now, not a plan to someday I will become the hero. But
Mm-hmm.
at this moment,
Yeah.
I am that.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever it is that you aspire to be, aspire to it right now in this present moment. Get some really high quality thoughts going. If you were what you really wanted to be, then who are you?
Mm.
The failure, the victim says, no, not yet. But the lion says, this is really satisfying. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I am that. I am there. And you'll have plenty of time to have those kind of thoughts and feelings right with each in breath and out breath. You can really work yourself up into a mountain that only a pissant like us could build.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another way of saying it is you become the emperor of your own pile of dirt. Everybody is an emperor of their own pile of dirt. Most people are just buried under theirs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then the thought, the high quality thought, is that I'm above that pile of dirt, lokatara, or supramundane, above it, in the sense that the emperor is just sitting on a great big pile of dirt,
Mm-hmm.
dressed in whatever ancient Egyptian or whatever magnificent clothing that you want to have that dream in. Because even the guys who are dressed like that are trying to aspire to the feeling that those ornaments are supposed to predict.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that since it's all a mental job for them anyway, guess what? It's a mental job for you too, ornaments or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have a red cape and a blue suit to be a Superman.
Mm-hmm.
You can just sit there and become that
Mm-hmm.
in a high quality way, especially in the sense of being above the world or being above that little person that you had become because of the circumstances that has not allowed you to have the actual freedom that you really want to give yourself anyway if you only knew how. This is how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
This is why it's called freedom. And you can literally dream your way into it
Mm-hmm.
by knowing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is, in fact, the real magic that transforms one, is put yourself in the mind state of the champion, and then you will begin to feel like a champion. And then you have enough habit of feeling like a champion that when those times come that you really need to feel like a champion, there it'll be.
All right. Great.
Okay, so these are the quality of the wholesome thoughts, but you can also look of it in the sense of the Four Noble Truths.
Okay.
So let's go and unpack it from that direction.
Okay.
All right, because this champion is, in fact, right now, not suffering. He is not engaged in the first noble truth because he knows how the second noble truth had him by the throat and had wrestled him onto the ground so many times in his life. It's almost, you probably heard the phrase that goes something like, "The hero dies once, but the coward dies 1,000
Right.
deaths."
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're talking about, except that it's not 1,000; it's hundreds of thousands because these things are little, but they're frequent.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes out with the kind of a phrase of, "I can't do that, Daddy." So it's a child who is insecure and still needs to be cared for by his parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so we become little children in that regard, rather than leaving the child that way. We actually have to kind of cheer the kid up, give him the self confidence he needs. Get get back up, dust yourself off. But see, most humans get all the way to adulthood, and the highest they can get up off the floor is that which everyone else reaches. And it is because of circumstances, kind of let's say very auspicious kinds of circumstances, that some people will graduate out of that ordinary lifestyle into being noble,
Mm.
being above the fray, being the champion. He's so secure inside that he doesn't have to get into the mud wrestling. That's the term I like to use.
Mm-hmm.
All the world is a mud wrestling pit. That's similar to Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and everyone's a player on the stage. But it's also exactly the same analogy. It's not just everybody's on the stage being an actor, but while they're acting, they're still in the mud with each other, slinging mud at each other. It's a competition.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point is to get off the stage so that you can go and enjoy the show. But you have to be really confident to leave the stage,
Mm-hmm.
get out of that world, which is society.
Mm-hmm.
So all the world that Shakespeare is talking about is the entire society, and it is huge and it's complex and it's got so many people in it trying to manipulate it in so many ways. And all you have to do is to have the fearlessness to step out of that,
Mm-hmm.
to aspire to be that he who is above it all. And so this is almost a way of thinking of noble right view is to get above it all and to see the whole mess, to see the world as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But we're doing it now from the state of complete satisfaction, and that we're the king, we're the lion, we're not the victim. We're not trying to look down on it as if we were just another victim, bird's eye view, or like from flying airplanes and that kind of thing, but rather being above the world in the sense of being free from it. It's almost like the airplane is still part of the world and part of the earth, is because it's working very hard against gravity, which is surely going to pull it right back down. That airplane, no matter how often it's in the sky, it belongs on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to work very hard to stay off the ground. Okay. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about it from the perspective of Jesus had the term being in the world, but not of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about altitude. We're talking about the letting go. And part of the teaching has to do with seeing the unwholesome mixture of good and bad that is in the world that causes so much turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a way of looking at this more noble frame of reference is to understand what is wrong view, what is ordinary right view, and what is supramundane right view, because it's the
Mm-hmm.
supramundane right view that comes above it. But that all of society is built upon ordinary right view because the society wouldn't work if everybody had the wrong view. And the
Mm-hmm.
wrong view basically be I can get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
I will not be punished for my wrong behavior. Therefore, I am free to be greedy and do as I please. Okay. Or in some cases, the kid will say, when he's caught, they ask him, didn't you know? I mean, you did it blatantly. Didn't you know you're going to get caught? And the kid says, yes, I knew I was going to get caught, but I don't care. Now, he may be lying to himself, but the whole point that we're making is there that there is, let us say, those that do intentional harm, thinking that their actions have no adverse value, versus then the right view is that things have value, that there is offering, there is giving, there are sacrifices like religions and that kind of stuff. There is mother and father in the sense that we will be somehow mentally dependent on mother and father our whole lifetimes. Though they may take the mask off, it's still mommy, mommy, take care of me. And so that's what God is the substitute for the fact that people don't really grow up,
Mm-hmm.
not completely. And that, by the way, I've just had a friend Tim send me a video. Rowan, uh, someone I'll have to attach it, and that he is a well-known, well-published university professor
Mm-hmm.
of whatever, I don't remember. But he is actually onto that, and he's talking about it that it is that most people die in old societies before the age of about 50.
Mm-hmm.
But now people live easily into their 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And that he says that it doesn't happen to many people, but a few people will actually take that long to fully grow up and mature.
Mm-hmm.
And so this whole idea of being completely mature means that you finally accept that noble truth that yes, by gosh and by golly, I am fully responsible for the way I feel about
Mm-hmm.
whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
That I no longer can get my mommy to rescue me. Okay, so that's when we come out of that victimhood into being that lion, being
Mm-hmm.
that king, being that emperor. And the whole point of it is that the attitude changes from being that victim into being the champion.
Mm-hmm.
It's an attitude. And guess what? The attitude is right there on the Eightfold Noble Path. When we practice correctly with right view, and the view is noble, rather than tainted the way that ordinary right view is. Why? Because they say that not only does good action give good results and bad action give bad results, but then they take it to the extreme and say that all actions are either good or bad, and that every action then has a kind of weight and is going to receive a good or a bad benefit no matter what and no matter how long it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have the Brahmin view of it, that they say, oh, we're Brahmin in this life because we were good in the past life, and you here, you're not a Brahmin, you were pretty good but not as good as we are, because if you were really as good as we are, you'd have been born Brahmin. Okay, that's actually a very interesting way of expressing racism,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows how long it's been around because that it was at least as old as 800 BC when the Brahmins were doing that, and that was like a 300-year-old tradition by the time the Buddha came by, and he really laughed at it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, that right view is what keeps people employed. That ordinary right view is if I work all week and I do a good job, then I'll get a reward. And sometimes people do a really good job and they get fired. Sometimes because they did a too good a job. Sometimes because they did a really good job in the wrong way and still pissed off the management. Or sometimes the problem is management and not the employee. But the fact is that that whole belief system that I'll get paid for my labor is always going to fail sometime. That everything is temporary. Companies go out of business. Guess what day they go out of business? On payday. Bankruptcy. That's the day they declare bankruptcy so that they don't have to make payroll.
Mm. Uh-huh.
Did you know that?
I did not, but it makes sense to me.
Well, I've been at that level in companies, so
Yeah.
I know how to watch a company go down the hole. Uh, so the whole point then is that these set of laws that we make in Congress, none of them are ever really kept
Mm.
because there'll always be people who find a way of trying to get around it. They call it a loophole. And so the more loopholes people crawl through, the more the fine mesh webbing of the laws to try to close out those loopholes become. And so the law becomes enormously complex, which means now you need a whole legal profession to manage all of those laws that have been put into place.
Mm-hmm.
You get the general gist of, and and it still goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is that the laws are intended to work, but the laws only work if everyone believes in the law of karma, that you will get punished. You cannot get away with it, that you will have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so this is the law, or the part of the law that freaks out some Buddhists when they hear about anatta, because they think that all the children will become renegades if they find out that they're not going to get punished and go to hell for misbehaving mommy.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids are trained that way in Thailand and in many other places, in religions and whatnot. Um, so they want to not lose that tool. They want to keep the tool on, that if you do bad, if you do wrong, you will get caught for it somehow, someplace, sometime.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not noble at all. And it doesn't work. It's spotty at best. And we have to have police forces
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes armies
Mm-hmm.
to make him behave the way I want him to behave. Okay, so that's the way that morality has grown, and it grows into an ordinary right view that makes society both tolerable and intolerable. Because the only thing that we have otherwise is absolute chaos, where everybody has the idea that they can get away with it, and
Mm-hmm.
you wind up with the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm.
No joke there, huh?
Yeah. I hear too much about Trump anyway, so it's
So you
I
know then you understand, at least you know the joke.
yes, yes.
Yeah, right. That
I live in the United
everybody's in
States.
on it. Yes, it's a whole mentality. It's the mobster mentality,
Hmm.
and that is that I can get away with it, or let me set it up so that I can get away with it. Which means let me see if I can find a fall guy to blame it on, so that he gets shot instead of me,
Hmm.
and all kinds. So it gets enormously selfish. That's the that's what takes us deepest into selfishness. It can become psychological problems.
Hmm.
So when we see people behaving in the extremes, we just can recognize that that's wrong view that I too have been sharing until I figured out. Because people who are, um, let us say, they're convinced that uh, the law of karma always works.
Hmm.
And so the danger is that if somebody believes that the law of karma works, and then he believes that it doesn't work, that he'll automatically fall to wrong view, rather than recognizing from wisdom that there are reasons to behave correctly.
Hmm.
That in fact we honor those who out throughout history were very high class and noble, not because they were royalty or kings, but sometimes it goes together. That's especially true in the Thai royal family, that is quite noble. That they have a lot of, in fact, I would go so far as to say almost all of the royal family, which is huge with thousands. If King Mongu by 1860 had 47 children, how many great grandchildren do you think he's got? And so the extended royal family is huge, but there's a noble element in it, in the sense that all of the young men generally will be a monk for 2 years. They
Hmm.
still do that, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's also the lineage with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa back into the royal family
Mm-hmm.
through one of the children of King Mongut, who became the toppish monk in the land. And then he had a student who then was designated as the top monk of the land. And that one was Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's teacher. So he's two steps back into the royal family. And I didn't know that until recently. But the point that I'm making is that this high quality, noble point of view is actually should be naturally required of those who are going to be assuming those roles rather than those that have wrong view. And so if we could figure out a way of electing officials who are of right noble view, then you know that you're going to have a better government
Mm-hmm.
than if you let someone who is of wrong noble view, but he's been working very hard to hide that. Not wrong noble view, just wrong view. Nothing noble about it. Sorry, slip of the tongue. So this nobleness that we're talking about is the attitude change that also is inflected uh, from the concept of change of lineage.
Change of what?
Change of lineage.
Lineage.
Lineage. Change of lineage. That you are no longer in the ordinary world of ordinary people, that you've actually now change of lineage, that this is one of the qualities that can be considered rebirth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jesus was talking about it. You must be born again in the spirit. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Not the spirit of the tough guy and the warlord, but the spirit of the guy who's even stronger than that, who's above it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, using all of these concepts to dance around it, both from historical ways and other things like that, we can come back and re-ask you, who would you be if you could be the highest quality you that you can think about? How good can you feel?
Mm-hmm. There's a. I feel like there's a very small glimmer, like a mental like idea that I have of what that would be. Um,
All right, we'll climb right into that baby and fly to wherever it'll take.
All right. So, all right. So during my sits, that's what I should try to
Mm-hmm.
focus into
Mm-hmm.
while keeping the breath in mind.
Yes, there's actually a child's nursery rhyme that actually does fit this when you understand the context, and that is when you wish upon a star.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you know the lines?
Uh, no, I know it's in Pinocchio. I think Jiminy Cricket sings it, right?
Something like that. Uh-huh.
When you wish upon a star, I don't know the next words.
Makes no difference who you are.
It's no difference who you are. Yeah. What are the next words?
The next line, I don't remember, but it does end with "Your dreams will come true,"
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is said in many different concepts, like knocking on the door. Jesus says, if you knock on the door,
Mm-hmm.
that the door will become open to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this whole teaching has been kept secret within the Sangha for all of these centuries and generations,
Mm-hmm.
so that only a few knew, because most is difficult. But now the Bhikkhu Buddhadasa started letting it out in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're doing out on the internet
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to show people that even though there is no magic, there is still something magnificent about the human mind, that we actually can grow into
Mm-hmm.
that which we know that the highest human being can become.
Mm-hmm. What would you recommend in terms of a practice schedule?
Whenever you can think of it, whenever you
Whenever I
remember,
think of it. All right. All right.
it's called sati.
Sure. Yeah.
And that the sitting practice is not the point.
Mm-hmm.
The point in sitting practice is to develop the skills that you need, just like we practice a piano to
Mm-hmm.
get the skills we need so that we can do that recital.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you can think of the recital as living your life. And so
Mm-hmm.
we go off on the side and sit down and practice anapanasati. And that what we've been talking about today is actually under the rubric of what is the Pali word you've probably heard called piti.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Piti is a feeling, which is an attitude that you are that which you want to be.
Mm. Okay.
And that which you want to be is champion. The Buddha called himself lion.
Mm.
Okay, so think about what's that? We're talking about being on top of the world, being the emperor mentally, so
Mm-hmm.
that you are fear. This is one of the most important qualities in is fearlessness. So in the sitting meditation, you get yourself into a state of great security, that
Mm-hmm.
you feel no fear, that you've got that settled down, because the self-preservation instinct,
Mm-hmm.
that's its job, is to keep you afraid, to keep you on your toes, to keep you alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it has no clue that there is nothing to fear. That's what we can see with our wisdom, to recognize, hey, baby, we're actually safe. Down, boy, down, boy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's like that we've got a reptilian brain that's like a barking dog that's just constantly barking all the time. Danger,
Mm-hmm.
danger, danger, Will Robert. Danger,
Mm-hmm.
danger. And so when we come to this state where we're really completely satisfied and relaxed, then that fearlessness quality comes in, around, which then can bring on this state of piti,
Mm-hmm.
which is that really good feeling.
Yeah, I sometimes experience pity in like flashes, but nothing
Okay, grab that flash and ride it like a cowboy.
It disappears too quickly. I'm not
Oh, now
able.
you want it though. No, you can say, aha, I see you.
I see what I see wanting.
No, that you see that there are some states that you have just flashed into.
Right.
You can do it once, you can do it again. Confidence.
All right, I'll do my best.
See, when it went away, you became afraid. Oh, it's gone, and then you've lost something and you're a victim again.
Yeah, that's true.
That's very subtle, but it actually is true. But if you
Yeah.
can maintain, aha, I see you. This is magnificent. Enjoy that magnificence, even if it was only a very short flash.
Yeah. Yeah.
because those flashes come when you're ready for them. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not ready for it to come back when you're wanting it just because it left. You
Mm-hmm.
were not in the state of wanting it when it came.
Mm-hmm.
You were in the state of fearlessness and satisfaction. And so it goes, this is what we mean by it goes deeper. And so you bring yourself into that state often while you're sitting. You practice to do that so that you can get good at being able to do that within a breath or so
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day, many times during the day. You just have a little nirvana moment. Ah.
Mm-hmm. So there is a period when I was practicing, maybe a couple of months ago, but it just came to mind, where once I would get fairly settled, if I would say something like "I take refuge in the Dharma," almost like clockwork, I would get like a wave of pity. Um, but but it seemed like to run out of juice. Like I could say the phrase like a couple times to bring it on, but if I kept on saying it, like it wasn't it
But
wouldn't
now do
work
you
anymore.
recognize that it has to do with the frame of mind that you're in? If you do it like a dull, dead mantra, like you expect it to work, and
Uh-huh.
the magic is in the word
Uh,
rather than the magic that's in the mind that you put yourself
yeah,
in.
I see. I see. I see. I see. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And so, with this new attitude that you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
so that no matter how obstructed, and that's really interesting in the way that we're talking now, is showing how you're going in the right direction, but you keep bringing up these obstructions. And but it doesn't matter how obstructed the mind gets. You
Mm-hmm.
can clear that out. We're talking about that right now of how to clean that stuff out so that we can get back into the states that we want to get into.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. I mean, I've had the experiences that I've wanted before. It's just the difficulty is the difficulty has been that I've been unable to recreate it.
Right, exactly. The thrill is gone. I've heard that song. Well, that's actually one of the problems is, let us say if you had a wonderful chocolate cake. It was very, very well done with the best chocolate cooked in just such a way, and it is still just warm. And
Hmm.
I'm going to add one little ingredient, and that is a great big flat turd.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean is that these stumbling blocks
Right.
can be not the main ingredient, and yet we still stumble over them.
Right.
And that the whole quality of the meditation or the whole quality of the Eightfold Noble Path can be stated in pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again. This goes exactly with the instructions of Goenka. Never mind, start again.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. And that what we see over and over again is the students will find something to stumble over as if it's an issue now, that once I've stumbled that way, I'll say what the point and start singing those songs. When the whole point was, let's do what we've been doing. How did we get anything in the first place?
Hmm.
Okay, we started again. We went back into correct practice.
Hmm.
And then when we get results, now we add a new ingredient, and that is the experience of having done it.
Hmm.
But what we wind up with is the memory or the crap that's left over at the end of the experience,
Mm-hmm.
which is that cow pie or that big turd that we lit on top of our chocolate cake. We ruin the experience because we won't let go of it. We want it back again. And
Mm-hmm.
now that becomes a stumbling block or hindrance to wanting it
Mm-hmm.
next time.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've got a huge chocolate cake. In other words, we're ready to go, except that we're also adding the new ingredient of, oh, I know what it was. I want that one again. I
Mm-hmm.
recognize that that's old news now. Let's
Mm-hmm.
go have whatever experience that this moment brings. And again, get ourselves in a state of satisfaction, knowing that you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then those feelings of success, because you're basically talking yourself into it anyway. And you already have the experience of the success, which we build upon. And that experience of the success is really powerful. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost becomes part of the energy that keeps you going. It's because you know that you've done it before.
Mm-hmm.
And you get confidence, that strata, so that you know that you can do this again over and over again. You can keep coming back and coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And that the more you practice it, the more often you practice it, and then the more often you're in that state, the more often you come back, and it begins to linger.
Mm-hmm. Should I be using the memories of past successes in my sits to try to recreate it?
Yes. Should
Okay.
you want it to come back again? No.
Okay.
Recreating it is completely different than mourning its loss when it went away.
Okay.
One's
Okay.
positive, the other one is negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can recreate it. You did it
Mm-hmm.
one time, you can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with how you're feeling. And so this is a way to learn to manipulate the feelings, to take
Mm-hmm.
control of them, because otherwise they're in control of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we go around feeling the way that we've been in the habit of feeling rather than feeling the way we want to feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the sitting meditation is getting your state into a feeling the way you want to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And James Brown's got just the right tune for it.
Which one?
I feel good, like I knew I would now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right.
So yes, that's a good meditation. That's a mantra for you. I feel good, like I knew I would now. So good.
All right. All right.
So this is the way that we practice. That's just another expression of I'm feeling good. That's said in that um, musical setting,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it's still that which we're pointing at is how do you want to feel?
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna make it more of a priority to use my memory and my imagination to wiggle into a mind state that I want.
Right, you've been successful before. You
Yeah.
haven't been a total failure all the time, just most
Right.
of the time. Is that not true?
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I generally feel like a failure. Just feel somewhere in the middle, I guess. But yeah.
Oh, so when you say in the middle, that it sounds like you saying, "Yeah, I really hurt, but not as bad as he does."
No, I'm just thinking of times where I've like really felt like a failure, and then I'm compared to times where I've really felt successful. I'd say most of the time I feel somewhere in between both of those.
Right. Okay. So now let's start capitalizing on feeling really successful.
Yeah, yeah,
And so remembering times that you were really successful at
right.
something, that it was genuinely successful and you took great joy in it.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
of those times for me, and I only talk about it occasionally, but at one time it was part of the meditation,
Mm,
was as I became through the practice and going through the trials and tribulations,
mm-hmm.
became the first chair tuba player in all state band in South Carolina in like 1964 or something.
Okay.
Okay, so being the best tuba player in the state was a big hit.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the way that I felt then was, in fact, the way that if that's a good top, that may not be the toppiest top, but that's a good, interesting memory.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not remember the event. Let's only
Mm-hmm.
use the event to trigger the feeling of the memory of how
Mm-hmm.
we felt, the actual experience of it. And
Mm-hmm.
now let's start using that as the object of meditation,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is
Okay.
that actual experience, that high quality experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this is just right out of the interpretation of the Anapanasati.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. Oh, I will. I'll do my
You look
best.
thoroughly confused.
No, 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 no. I was thinking of different memories, um, and I was wondering if certain memories, if good feelings were there, but the memory itself wasn't wholesome, if that would be worthwhile,
Well,
or working against myself, or.
uh, a lot of success it comes from competition.
Mm-hmm.
And all is fair in love and war. When it comes to competition, winning is the point. And the reason for the point of winning is to get this good feeling.
Right. No, I wasn't thinking about competition. I was thinking about drugs that I used to use.
And sometimes they made you feel good, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can remember that.
So
Remember how
I
you,
so I can use those memories, but then just to get to the feeling, and then just focus on the feeling.
mm-hmm,
Okay.
exactly. Use the wholesome
Mm-hmm.
and abandon the unwholesome.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yes, you can do that. Look, remember how you want to feel.
All right.
Because
So, something
you've had
something it feels a little icky doing that. But I'll try it out.
But the icky feeling is the new feeling that you have based upon uh, rites, rules, and rituals, and all kinds of stuff,
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
making the child feel guilty again. You
Right.
felt icky before, but
Right. Right.
we're looking at what is wholesome, useful, valuable, and beneficial, not what's right and wrong.
Right. Okay. All right. I'll try to use some of those memories, and try to use what's good in them in order to help me out now.
help you out. Yeah, I would, let us say, bring you or assist you into the state of being a winner, being
Right.
a lion, being a champion, being that which is above it all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and shoot for the high quality Piti.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna do my best. That's
Okay, enjoy. Enjoy it. That's the whole point of make this
yeah.
a really enjoyable journey.
All right, I will.
Always with the background praise, hey, I can do this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I'm
That, by
not.
the way, is the very first step of the noble path, is the knowledge that I can do this.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm fixing my screen now. Something went weird.